to be recorded, then before they speak, they just need to notify us and we'll switch off the recording whilst that person speaks. But normally people are quite happy to be recorded. It would be really helpful if everybody puts their microphones on mute. And it would also be really, really helpful if you could put your name and contact details and your council, if you're representing a council, in the chat. So we've got 25 on the call, which is a good number. So I'm going to share a presentation and then hand over, well, really to you to discuss how we take this project forward. Okay, the Somerset Bus Partnership. We've got a team of 7 representatives, 2 of whom come from South Somerset. Tony Rees, who was the founder of the Somerset Bus Partnership, and Linda Snelling, who I think will be known to many of you. She leads our Yeovil bus user group and is very, very active, providing information on Facebook in particular, on bus changes, bus cancellations, sadly, as well as leading the bus user group in Yeovil and liaising with Yeovil Town Council. We also, in addition to having the regional representatives, we also have 3 specialist consultants who work with us, who provide a lot of our understanding of what's going on in the bus industry and help us go forward with it. So, background. For most of the last 2 decades, buses has been rather the overlooked mode of transport, particularly during the period of austerity. We saw council grants cut, and we had lots and lots of bus cuts across the country, but particularly here in Somerset, because our then county council saw buses as being not the priority that perhaps many of us on this call might view them to be, and they made cuts. They didn't support any Saturday or evening services whatsoever. But then that carried through into how, this is what we call the chart of shame, how much money each of the councils was supporting their bus services. And this just demonstrates how much Somerset had cut compared with other counties. There we are, some 40% below the average for those 5 authorities. And the consequence of that was that when Somerset was working on its BSIP bid, a piece of research came up which showed that Somerset had the worst rated bus services in all of England. And I think many of us who were using buses could understand why it was like that in Somerset. Things haven't been transformed, but there is a new approach to buses. The reason why they haven't been rapidly transformed is the financial challenge that Somerset finds itself in. It's by no means the only local transport authority and council in the country to be similarly challenged. Many councils are potentially facing running out of money altogether. Somerset, for the current financial year, had a huge hurdle to overcome. For the next financial year, which is currently being worked on, the challenge is going to be even bigger. But what changed the whole approach to buses, love him or hate him, is dear old Boris, because Boris was a real bus enthusiast. Having been Mayor of London, he saw the role that buses can play in communities, and he introduced Bus Back Better and quite a pot of money to help transform bus organisation across the country. And Somerset was one of only a third of all the authorities who got allocated money. They put in a huge bid and ended up getting only a small percentage of what they asked for, but they still got £12 million, which was a pretty hefty sum of money. And the reason why buses became much more centre stage than they'd ever been before is, of course, the climate emergency, because buses offer the opportunity of achieving modal shift out of private cars and onto buses, and there are other options like active travel and rail. But buses, for certain types of journeys, such as Yeovil to Taunton or Yeovil to Wincanton, is the alternative to going by car. The other factor which kicked in more recently was the cost of living crisis, because buses were a cheaper way of travel than running a car. Even more so when the government introduced the £2 flat fare at the beginning of this year, a really remarkable transformation of the cost of traveling. It halved the cost of going by bus to places like Taunton or Wincanton. And one advantage of seeing the end of HS2 is that using some of that money, Rishi Sunak announced that the £2 fare wasn't going to end at the end of this month, as had been the plan, but it was going to be extended by some 15 months and would continue throughout 2024. And so bus passengers and people thinking of transferring from driving a car and going by bus have the certainty that bus fares are not only going to be one of the few items which is actually a lot cheaper this year than it was last year, but also one of the very few items which will be still only the price this time next year as it is today. So £2 flat fare is a really major factor, and it's had a huge impact on bus patronage in Somerset and across the country. The other thing for those who are of my vintage is, of course, the concessionary card, which actually makes buses completely free of charge after 9:30 in the morning, and there is no better deal than that. And so what was the consequence of that? Well, in Somerset, we saw overall passenger volumes increase by 16% mid-year. And we've just heard that after 9 months, passenger volumes have increased by 21%. So a really dramatic uptick in the amount of bus passengers using that form of transport across the county. So given all that good news, why is it that we're talking about bus routes under threat? That's because the cost of operating buses has risen dramatically. I've seen figures suggesting 40 or 50% increases in the cost of operating buses. And on long rural routes, like there are quite a few in Somerset, in particular, the routes that are now under threat, routes like Minehead to Taunton, Dulverton to Taunton, and of course, Yeovil to Taunton, Yeovil to Wincanton. Those are long rural routes, which has always been harder for bus operators to make money out of. And that's, given the increased cost of operating buses, has resulted in a situation where First South, the people who operate buses of Somerset, went to Somerset Council and they said, unless you subsidise these 4 bus routes, there's going to be dramatic cuts. And so Somerset was left in the position, this was in the middle of July, that either they agreed to allocate all their remaining funds to supporting these 4 routes, or they would be immediately cancelled. As it is, the funding, it's government funding, only extends at the moment to the end of March. And so what is now being said is that these 4 routes will either disappear or be markedly reduced at the end of March unless we can get a significant uplift in the amount of bus passengers. Mike Rigby, the council lead on transport, says he's appealing directly to the communities on these routes to save their services by using them, which is why we've got so many councils being represented on this call this evening. We approached parish councils and town councils along the 54 and the 58 route to join us this evening, just to consider what we can do to save our bus services. Mike went on to say the reality is simply not enough people are using them currently. And in the current financial situation that Somerset is in, there just will not be enough cash available to maintain the level of subsidy that has been going into those buses and will go into those buses between now and next March. Come April the 1st, there is going to be a new era of budget cutting, and that is going to affect particularly these 4 routes. And whilst the government is continuing to fund buses, the amount of money is being reduced. So less money coming to help support buses, and at the same time, cost escalation for the bus operators. And so Somerset's going to be faced with some very tough decisions. And it's really important to get as many people onto the buses to increase the number of people on the buses. And my computer decides to move on. There we are. So what is First South saying? Well, the big issue was First South as far as most bus passengers are concerned. And when we say First South, that means buses of Somerset in this part of the world. The big issue is reliability. First is very open about it. I was in a meeting, as was Tony today, with Simon Goff, who's the managing director of First South, and he agrees that the service that they've been providing is not good enough, and they really do need to make some big improvements. He says that a lot of improvements are underway and improvements are being delivered. For example, he gave us some interesting data on punctuality. 90% of buses should be running punctually, said Simon Goff. And at the moment, they are not achieving the minimum standard that First South believe that they ought to be. They are getting better, but there have been some really very bad times this year when the buses of Somerset service was just not acceptable. What Simon Goff said is that his target, which he's striving to get towards, and he says he will deliver, is 95%. That's where he wants to be. At the moment, things have got a bit better from pretty dire situation a number of weeks ago, and they're just nudging the minimum acceptable level of 90%. There's a term called lost mileage. This is what I'm afraid Linda has to report a lot on, which are cancelled services. And the data that we've got here, the orange line is their target. And they've actually increased their target. The lower the figure, the better the result. They've actually toughened their target since the beginning of September. And you can see what they're hoping to do is to reduce the amount of lost mileage, the amount of cancellations. At the middle of September, they hit another peak. They've been there before, but services were really very unacceptable at that time. As you can see, later on, moving into October, there has been a marked improvement. Now, this is the data that First South have been monitoring. And so things have got better, but they've got better from a very, very poor situation. And so when we look at First Group, people who run buses of Somerset, they've actually had a really good year. The last financial year saw them make £97 million and paid just £10 million in tax. And last week they had their results for the first half of the new financial year. And as you can see, they hiked their profit outlook, and it's very much from their bus operations that they were doing so very well. They would point out that operating buses in rural areas is not a highly profitable, high payback scheme, but we do have one of the most prosperous, one of the most profitable, one of the largest bus operators handling buses of Somerset. What we want to see from them is more investment, an improvement in their performance, and an investment in their bus stock. So let's now look and focus on the under threat routes. There are 4 of them. 2 of them go out of Taunton westwards. One is the Minehead route. And First is saying that unless they see an increase in patronage, there will be severe cuts to that route. And interestingly, though they say they want to see a big increase in patronage, that route, the 28, had one of the highest volume growths during this year. But according to First, it's not good enough. They want even more. And we now have a figure as to what it should be. The figure that they've said is 143 additional return trips per day for the whole route on each of the 7 days that bus operates. 143, when you look at the nature of the towns along that route, is quite an achievable target. We've seen already that the £2 fare has helped increase dramatically patronage on that route. So that's quite an achievable target. There is also, out of Taunton going west to Dulverton, a route which doesn't go through many large centres of population, with Liscombe is probably the largest, and that's also threatened with major cuts, and it's not a highly regular or frequent service. Talking about an extra 100 additional return trips per day for that route, which is probably quite a tough challenge. So coming to Yeovil, the Yeovil to Wincanton route, it's threatened with complete cancellation unless we can get an improvement in the number of passengers. This is why it's so important to look to see what your councils, your communities can do to boost bus passenger numbers on the routes going through your villages and your towns. I know from what Linda has shown us that quite often this bus can come in chock-a-block, but what First is saying is most of the time there are just not enough people on the route. And they're looking to add 117 additional return trips per day to help transform that bus into a commercially viable position. What is interesting is that when you look at the impact of the £2 fare, that route has been the most impacted by the £2 fare. They have the highest proportion of people using the £2 fare. So the £2 fare, we can deduce from that, has really worked for that route, but we need to see even more people paying just £2 to use that bus service. Yeovil to Taunton, the 54, it's again threatened with cancellation. It is utterly inconceivable that we can't have a bus route between the two largest towns in Somerset, but that's what the current situation is unless we can boost the numbers of people travelling on the current 54 service. The requirement is, I think, when one looks at the size of Yeovil and Somerton and Taunton, as well as some of the other towns and villages that the 54 goes through, is quite an achievable target of 100 additional return trips per day across the whole route. So those are the figures. Oh, and the £2 fare, as you can see, has also been very effective for boosting the numbers on the 54 as well. So people are not saying at Somerset Council that if you don't achieve those figures, you are going to lose the 54 route and you are going to lose the 58 route. What they're saying is it's absolutely essential that we increase the number of bus passengers so that even if we haven't got those buses to become commercially viable, the discussions that are going to be taking place with Somerset Council come the end of next March, when they're looking at what needs to be done to keep those buses going throughout the next financial year, is if we increase the number of passengers significantly, then the amount of subsidy that First South will be asking to keep running the, let us say, the 54 service will not be as much as First South is currently asking for. So it's not as though the gun is literally being held to our heads and said, if you don't hit this target, there isn't going to be a 54. What is being said to the communities, the councils along the route is, please, can you help us get more people onto the buses? Can you do whatever is possible for you to do to encourage more people to use those bus services? And Somerset Council is going to help. Its Bus It campaign, they're going to be promoting using Facebook advertising. They're going to be promoting using those buses on those routes on Facebook, and they're also producing posters. I think most of the parish and town clerks have already been approached about this. They'll be sending out posters over the next 10 days or so to the parish and town clerks who've requested them. Quick look at the posters. They'll actually have, as you can see here, the route number on, and they talk about how cheap it is, cheaper than a latte, and that you can read or you can relax on a bus, which you can't do so much when you're driving a car. But I think the powerful message is less than a latte. It's a way of demonstrating the value and the affordability of going by bus. We in the Somerset Bus Partnership are also doing our bit, we'd like to think. We've run Catch the Bus month events, 10 of which actually took place along the routes of these 4 affected buses. Linda organised one which I actually came down and joined her at in Yeovil, got a lot of interest in Yeovil, and First Bus did come along and joined us. There was one in Langport, and you probably noticed our decals. We funded this from raising funds from councils and from various charities. We used a large proportion of our funds to produce these decals, and they're up around all the under threat bus routes, on chiefly on bus shelters. They're available. If you'd like some of these decals, then please do get in touch. We can make further supplies available, and perhaps they are the sort of things that could go up in community halls and so forth. We're updating this decal so that it now reads, at the moment it reads through to the beginning of November. It's now going to be reading on the revised one and the updated one through to the end of 2024. So here are some suggestions as to what you could be doing. And I'm well aware that, encouraged by unitary Somerset councillors, a number of parish and town councils are already actioning plans to boost bus passengers. In Wiveliscombe, they've produced a bus poster. This one is a bus poster that the Yeovil Bus Group has developed, and the Somerset Bus Partnership also has its own poster. We can supply the artwork, we can supply the designs, we can do anything that you might need to be able to produce your own posters. And of course, Somerset Council will be sending you copies of the posters that they've been producing for you. So there'll be potentially a lot of posters to put up, but there are a lot of places those posters can go: in schools, colleges, doctors' waiting rooms, supermarkets, anywhere where we can influence people and try and get the message to them about what good value the buses are, and to raise the profile of buses, make it an option for people and make them much more aware of it. One of the surprising things we discovered on our bus stalls is that there are still a lot of people who didn't know about the £2 fare. There hasn't been a national government advertising campaign talking about it. The bus companies don't market their own products. They seem to expect people like you and me and the councils to promote their products. There hasn't been a big campaign. And when you tell someone for the first time that bus fares are only £2, it really does have a really big impact, because it is surprisingly good value for money. And printed information is still king. A lot of bus users find it so much easier to use a printed timetable than having to look on their mobile phone, if they've got one, or on a computer screen to work out where the buses are. Planning your trip, it's much easier if you've got a printed timetable. And at our bus stalls, we had people queuing up to get bus timetables from us. That's partly because this brochure from First South of their bus times in this area, they changed their bus times on September the 3rd, but that brochure wasn't delivered until September the 20th. So all the bus times were changing on September the 3rd. There was no printed material being provided by First until 2.5 weeks later. We in the Somerset Bus Partnership at our bus stalls were giving out timetables that we'd printed, and that's why we had such queues of people wanting them, because we were the only people who could supply them at the time. We're great believers in not only printed timetables, but also local timetables. Now, I live in the north of the county, and some 8 years ago, we were threatened, as you're threatened, with the loss of our first bus services. They've handled both the two major routes through our village, and those services were going to be withdrawn by First. We campaigned, we argued, we battled, we did lots of things, and in the end, they maintained a very limited service. What we as a parish council did, we produced a local bus timetable, and we promoted buses in our village very hard. And now, as you can see, we have a very good bus service. We now have a better bus service than we did 8 years ago, when we were in danger of losing a bus service when First were going to withdraw it. And that's because so many people in our village now use the bus, and it's because the parish council has got behind them to promote buses within the community. We deliver this timetable to every house in the village, and the people who deliver it are the parish councillors. And we get lots of thanks from people when we're pushing it through the door or knocking on their door to hand it over. So it's a really important thing that each of the councils, whether they're town councils or each of the parish councils, can do, and it's affordable. It costs us £150, £160 to print this. Now, most parish councils could find that amount of money. Bus timetables now in Somerset are only going to change twice a year. So we're talking at the most just over £300 to deliver a timetable into every household in your communities. Obviously, because the print run would be greater for a town like Yeovil or a town like Wincanton, it's worth considering if that is an option that you should do, because we know, and I think you can understand, that people they prefer to have a timetable, and they prefer to have a timetable which is easy to read, rather than the massive figures that you get on a bus operator's timetable. So those local timetables, once you've got them printed, not only should you deliver them to every household, you should put them in the local shops, local pubs, bed and breakfast, hotels, caravan parks, anywhere where visitors might choose to come and stay and might be tempted to travel and explore the area on the bus, as well as they should go to schools and colleges because it's a way of reaching a different demographic. Places like the doctors' waiting rooms, in supermarkets, information centres, tourist attractions, and even into local businesses, because a lot of people commute to work, and so it's a good place as well as to households is also to the place of work. And your bus timetables ought to be, I suggest, on your parish and town websites, and I'm sure many of you are already doing it, but it's another way of making it easier and more high profile to find out about the bus times in your area. And of course, all local events should have how to get there by bus and how to get home again by bus in the leaflets and promotional material. Bus timetable cases are an issue. We wish that the bus companies would produce customized bus timetables for each bus stop, showing what time the bus is arriving at that particular bus stop, rather than printing sheets like this, which are difficult to read, particularly for older passengers, who are a very important group who have not returned to the buses as enthusiastically as other groups. They're a particularly important target group for us to get more older people back onto buses. And it's not made that easy when they have information like this. Also, it's worth looking.
Here's episode 6. Take off those rose-colored glasses. They don't match your outfit.
I'll just shut my Alexa up. I'm sorry. Alexa, off. Somebody's listening to me anyway. Bus timetable cases. This is not a very good use of the bus timetable case. It's a pity that clearer information isn't shown. If there's anything wrong with the bus timetable cases in your village, in your town, on your bus route, then please tell Somerset Council. They have taken it on board that they will replace and maintain bus timetable cases. They prefer to do it route by route, but if you've got a problem with the bus timetable case, either it's broken, it's disappeared, it's been vandalized, then do contact Somerset Council and they will, they have said, do something about it. Finally, let's promote buses. Let's promote them in the local media. It could be by featuring local celebrities. That local celebrity might be the chair of the town council or the parish council. It might be a local sports person. But if we can get them to encourage people to go on buses, to show that with their Facebook pages that they're using buses, it's a way of raising the profile of buses and encouraging and making it a better way to travel and recognized as being a better way to travel. Local newspapers, free sheets, journalists know that buses make news and are news. So if you've got a story about what you're doing to promote buses in your local area, then tell the newspaper. Linda gets coverage locally for what she's doing. You could do the same thing. It's a receptive target group for you, is local newspapers. Parish magazines, they reach a certain demographic. They're very heavily read by that demographic. Get articles into the parish magazines about what good value bus fares are and how you can travel very affordably by bus. Parish and town websites should have information about buses. Some councillors, particularly Somerset councillors, send out e-newsletters. Please, if you're one of those councillors, please write about buses in your newsletter. And local radio. I've been on local radio. Linda's been on local radio. They will report news stories about buses. They are interested in buses. So it's all there for the grabbing. It's the opportunities you ought to grab hold of. And if you want a bus stall, then in your village or in your town, then we're experienced at running bus stalls. We run more bus stalls than any other county in the whole country. Make contact and we'll see if we can provide materials and even people to come along to your bus stall. And then the final weapon, social media. Facebook. Most communities have Facebook pages now for those communities. They often have a really high reach. It's very easy to take one of the images that Somerset are going to send through to you and write a Facebook post. It's very easy to, if you're involved in a sports club and you've got an event, or you're involved with a pub and you've got an event there, to put it on Facebook and just to say how you could get to that event by going by bus. It's interesting, we put a post up on our Somerset Bus Partnership, which doesn't have a huge following. It's deliberately quite a niche website, Facebook page. It was announcing the £2 fare being extended through to the end of 2024. We had nearly 40,000 views of that. And we got so many because it was shared over 100 times. All sorts of people, all sorts of Facebook pages were featuring that post. And it just shows that if you've got something newsworthy, put it on Facebook and it can get real traction. It can go literally viral. And this one did do. Finally, and perhaps a bit more left field, if you are doing a lot of things to keep your first bus operating in your village, your town, if you are actually doing the job of work that a big company like First Bus ought to be doing themselves, but they leave it to the likes of bus campaigners, and now local councils are being asked by Somerset Council to get behind this scheme. Why not tell First just what you're doing? And why not tell them just how important that bus service is to their community? So I would suggest that you write to David Martin. He's the chair of First Group. This is a huge multinational transport conglomerate which he heads up. But I can assure you that if you write to directors of these companies, it does get through. What's more, they ask questions about what is happening once they become alerted to an issue. So writing a polite letter saying what you're doing and how important that particular bus route is to your community and sending it to David Martin will get senior management very much involved in doing everything they can do to improve the reliability of their bus services, so that when you're promoting them, you're promoting a service which is going to be much appreciated and will grow and will be maintained into 2025. Thank you very much for listening. What I would now ask is that it's time for you to talk. Linda, would you like to say anything? Put you on the spot, I'm sorry.
Yeah, where do you start? I mean, I've produced a few poster type PDFs that I'm hoping to put up around. I think my colleague is sending those out to different councils and community people. It's really concerning, actually. If you've got any, if you think you can get involved in help or want to sort of help promote this, please just get in contact. We're doing our best. These buses, the 54 and 58, I'm very passionate about. They have a lot more. They're vital at the end of the day. They're for people that can't afford buses, cars. That people who can't actually drive either, but they take people to hospitals and employment, and it's just really hard. And we are fighting, obviously, to try and keep them. But I've read a few of the messages about reliability that I totally agree. I find it frustrating. I am actually working with First operations manager to try and sort out some of the issues. I know only too well all the cancellations that are going across the county, because I'm literally taking the information that they're posting on Twitter and trying to get it out there as quickly as I can for all the others. But I'm fully aware that there is a majority of people that still don't know if their bus is going to turn up or whatever. So this is an issue that really needs to be also targeted as well. I'm really disheartened because the 54 for me was a battle that I was fighting just last year when we had a split service. So to get it back direct again was quite an achievement. So to have it suddenly on the endangered list, it feels a bit difficult to swallow, really. But yeah, if you can come up with any ideas yourself as well about how maybe we can work together and get the information out there. The £2 fare is amazing. We are very lucky that it's been maintained at £2 cap, as opposed to it was going to go up in November by £2.50. So it would have been an extra £1 or so return. But yeah, please. Thank you.
Thanks. So if you raise your virtual hand, if you'd like to join in this conversation, this debate, this discussion as to what we can do.
Nita Dukowski is trying to raise her hand.
Sorry, I don't. Hold on.
A real hand,
Yep.
Anita, don't worry.
That'll do.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know where my virtual hand is. So I'm afraid you have to excuse me on that one. I mean, we're on the 25. I'm in Milverton, so I'm from on the Wiveliscombe Dulverton line. You say you want more people on them, but I think a lot of people from my village anyway would probably have bus passes. How does that impact on it?
The bus operator does get a proportion of revenue for every bus pass. So one of the real key targets is older pensioners, because pensioners during COVID got very nervous about going by bus.
Mhm.
And of all the demographics, they've been the one slowest to return to buses. So we're very, very keen to encourage bus pensioners to use buses. Really
Okay.
important.
Yeah, we have horrors of people. The buses. We have a particular problem where we are, because where the buses go is a very narrow street, and quite often people park down that street, despite all our efforts to get them to move. And quite often the buses do not actually come through Milverton at all. They will drop people on the bypass and go straight off to Wiveliscombe. And it's very difficult to try and encourage people when, you know, the service itself is not particularly reliable, as you've already said. And when we have this this thing happening quite frequently, actually, and I just don't sort of really quite know where to go with it.
Can I respond?
Please do, yeah.
Yeah, funnily enough, I was in a meeting this afternoon, and the 25 was picked up, and there were some anomalies with drivers not going to certain areas. There was one which was Laycott Cross, is that in Wiveliscombe?
Right.
But also Melverton was also raised. So you've actually given me the information of what is the problem that they weren't, what it was, because it was kept very general.
Oh, right.
As I say, I've actually since then, I had a message. I messaged the operations manager. He's fairly new, but he's very engaging, and he's also very on the ball with buses, and he's very much wanting to improve things. So I actually had already dropped him a line about the Milverton. There was an issue with Milverton. So he's got back to me. Now I know what is the issue. I will then pass that one on to him so that he knows, so that we can try and maybe liaise with that.
Yeah, I mean, what has happened is, I mean, we have sent notices to all the houses along North Street, which is where the problem lies, and more than once actually, to ask them not to block the road because of the bus service. It's not met with great success, but it's difficult. But the other issue is that it appears that the bus drivers, it's not clear actually, because the bus drivers can be coming along the road, say from Preston Bowyer, and all of a sudden decide just not to go to Milverton.
Right.
They haven't even tried. Well, I mean, it's difficult for them to come through Milverton if they're going to be stuck. Now, I don't know how they get that information, whether that information has been passed on to them by the bus that's coming down or going up, or whether the one that they're crossing. I really don't know.
Right.
So that would be interesting to know, because I know certainly there have been children left in Wiveliscombe, or young people left in Wiveliscombe who've come in from Taunton, and their parents have had to drive from Milverton to go and get them.
Right. They've been stuck on the bus because it just hasn't come through.
No, that's right. It won't go through. And also in the winter, if they drop them at the roundabout from on the road coming from Taunton to go up to Wiveliscombe, it's not a safe road, and it's not really well lit down there as well. So
you're saying they drop them off at the roundabout?
I believe they drop them off at the roundabout somewhere. Not quite sure exactly where, because I know people have complained to me about it, but I'm not sure exactly the exact specific spot. So those are some of the issues around it.
Right. Okay.
If that might help.
Yeah, that does. If you want to contact Peter, and then maybe we can exchange emails or something so that I can take some stuff. That's great. Is that
Thank you
okay?
very much. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's
Okay.
great. Thank you very much indeed for that.
If you put, as you may have done, but please do put your contact details in the chat, and then we can make contact.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do that right now.
Tony Rees.
I was just going to add to that. Linda has a habit of getting the things done. We have a temporary bus stop in Yeovil during the Yeovil Refresh Works, which people kept stopping at. And she complained to the police, to drivers who were there. We got signage along the bus stop. The signage has got bigger and bigger and better. And we now very rarely have anybody stopping there. So talk to Linda. She will tell you how she gets these things done. You can either talk direct to First Group, talk to the police, just carry on until you really make an effort. It's not acceptable that people are left behind and people, children are left out in cold places, particularly with the winter coming on. So yes, push it. Like all the things we're talking about tonight, there are things you can do with our help. We will talk to you. As you say, if you've left your information in the chat, we will get in touch anyway.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. I really appreciate that.
Simon of 4 Acres, I'm being told that you've had your hand up and I didn't spot it. Simon, go ahead.
Yeah, I can't do a virtual one, I'm afraid, but thank you for noticing. Two comments. One, I'm in Devon, but the 25 comes through Bampton, and that's why I'm on this one. Does Devon make any contribution to the costs of that service, is the one question. The other is, we run the Bampton Charter Fair. We've had great success this year with giving out information about the fair with a QR code. And people have logged onto the QR code and have come straight in and got information about it and responded. Has that been something that you've used at bus stops in order that people can get information about bus timetables?
On the QR code, that is something which has just starting to be rolled out in Somerset. It's a really interesting idea, and Somerset have bought into it, but literally it's only just started to roll out. As far as the 25 service, is it supported by Devon? I don't think
I'm not sure. I know David Redgewell mentioned something about following that one up, because I believe that they do put something in, but I'm not sure. I can't be 100% sure. I believe there may be something.
I think David Redgewell this morning said Devon do not put anything in. They've not been asked. And why doesn't Somerset ask Devon to help? It used to. And we get a lot from David Redgewell, particularly about all cross-border routes. He gets very upset when Somerset try and do everything themselves and won't talk to other operators. Is the 25 the one that runs through the national park?
Yes, yes, probably does cross the park.
And the national park have funds that they could help with, but they need to be asked. If Somerset won't do it, I put it back to you. Go and talk to the national park, see if they have any money they could add to the mix, and try and persuade them to talk to Somerset if Somerset won't talk to them. Today is really all about what we can do to fill in the gaps left by the county council and by the council and by First. It's not good. You might complain that what we're asking you to do is somebody else's job, but these days those jobs just don't get done. So yes, if you have a contact or you want to have a contact, again, come to us, and I'll get David Redgewell to give you the contacts he read out this morning. We need to look, as I've been saying for 20 years, we need to look at other ways of funding buses. or of getting other people involved to actually promote them.
Okay, thank you for those responses. Sadly, I have to go, but I'll follow that up. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks for
And
joining
if
us.
you leave your details with us, we'll talk to you.
Okay.
Councillor William Wykes Wood.
Oh, one second. There we go. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, that's me, Wilkeswood. Right, I'm on the parish council of Curry Mallet, which is well, it's in a very unenviable position for public transport advocacy in that it's quite convenient for the nearest town from Carr, but has, well, absolutely zero direct bus routes to speak of. But our closest lifeline is the 54, albeit a nearly half-hour walk away. But still at the point where it is somewhat practical for those fit in body to get to it. But yes, it's a dire prospect, certainly, to think that it may be cancelled outright. It's a service I've used occasionally myself, but one trouble with it, I think, is the limited hours that it runs. And the last bus leaves Taunton at 6:15, which gives limited options for people who want to use it for commuting, and no options for people who want to use it to experience the town of an evening, to go out to eat, to have a drink, anything like that. It's sometimes something I've often rued that I've wanted to go out there with friends, and I can't really get down there during the day. I because I work here, and I'm only really free in the evenings, and even it's I wonder if there's really any way that we can reach out to them for it, because it's a difficult ask when they're thinking of axing it already. But I feel sort of strongly that even one late evening or nighttime bus would allow it to become just that much more versatile and open it up to basically a whole clientele of people who are completely have completely no options for otherwise at the moment. So I don't know what the best way of advocating for that would be, but I'm certainly would be very keen to explore options.
I'm sure Linda would totally agree with you, and certainly I would agree as well, that if a bus runs at a time when it allows people to return home after often a long day at work, then the person is going to go in the first place to work on the bus. If they can't get back home on a bus in the early evening, then they are not going to use it in the first place. So it's a chicken and egg. Nothing is going to change on that now until next March, April time, because we only have 2 changes a year now. But certainly that is a point worth making. Make it to your unitary councillor and write to Somerset about it. I mean, the more people who are making that case, the stronger Linda will be in arguing that case. So do make the case. Local councillors are listened to by Somerset Council.
Can I add a couple of things to that? Today is about the threats to the 54 as it is. Yes, we all want improvements. Lots of people have already said, how can I promote this when the service doesn't do this, this and this? And the answer is, we have to promote it today with the services we've got, with whatever we can do to persuade people. Then, if the service is saved from cancellation, we can start to push for other things. Somerset have introduced evening services in and out of Taunton. They did say that if they're successful, the next one they would probably consider would be the 54. So we're not miles away from having an evening service. As Peter said, it wouldn't be this year, it probably wouldn't be next year. And The difficult message you have to get across to people is that getting people onto the bus now will make those sort of things possible. Not having enough people on the bus now not only doesn't do anything for the environment, doesn't do anything for those people in your community who rely on that service. And there's another argument you can use to get additional people onto the service now to support those who need it. And the other thing I'd say to you in Curry Mallet, you do have a slinky service in your area, do you not?
There's, I believe, one local community bus that goes to Langport very briefly, sort of for an hour or so, and then it takes it back. But I think that's
a service. That's a service bus that runs once or twice a week, I think.
Yeah, once a week, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes.
But there's also Slinky in your area, which says if you haven't got a bus service, you can ask for a bus to take you from your village to the nearest place with the village. So if you've got people who can't manage that walk into wherever the 54 is, then you should be able to use the Slinky service. Slinky service has a lot of detractors, a lot of problems with it. But again, if we don't use it, we will lose it anyway.
Okay, that's actually something I wasn't aware of. Do you have a link to a link to something that I can read up on this about?
I will do. I'll put it in the chat in a minute when I've found it.
Thank you. Yes.
Gary Mon from Somerton, which of course is a town where Somerset is going to be investing quite a lot of money in a direct response service. So over to you, Gary.
Hello, good evening. Yeah, thank you for this presentation. It was really interesting. It's something that I've been involved with for a couple of years. I used to be a support worker for adults with learning disabilities. One thing that the council doesn't do when a bus pass is issued to someone with a learning disability, there is no companion pass that could be issued with it. Now that person then is sort of discriminated because they won't use the bus because they don't know how to get on it. They're very scared. You're almost limiting their where they can go, what they can do, on the basis that there is no one to travel with them. So it's just something that I've seen in other counties and has worked really well, is that the companion ticket for someone with a learning disability to start with, that means that they get on free with the person with a learning disability. That would be 2 people accounted for on the bus to add to your numbers. And there are so many people with adults with learning disabilities who would absolutely love to use the bus service. And there are organisations all over Somerset that one of them is called Discovery, that actually uses bus services as an independence training. So bus training to them is paramount, because you're giving someone on a short period of time the independence to go alone eventually. But in the meantime, we need to train them. We need to give them that support and give them that encouragement. I think we're just missing out a trick somewhere in regards to getting the footfall back on the buses. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It makes a lot of sense. Again, I would urge you to talk to your unitary councillor, and probably, because you know the topic with some depth, write to Mike Rigby at Somerset Council about it. You make a really interesting point.
It's just that I've learned through the LCN network, the local community network, that actually statistics are very important. So one of my next things is actually trying to ask the council just how many people with learning disabilities are registered with them, and how many of them have bus passes, because that bus pass is no good in their wallet.
Yeah.
It needs to be shown on the bus.
Yeah.
And if they will not use it because they're not confident, and it goes back to the statement that actually the bus service needs to be consistent, but that's a different story. That's something that will come in time. However, getting them on the bus is paramount, because that there is a whole huge niche of bus passes that are not being used, and they're just sat in people's wallets. Once we get that bit sorted, we can involve that to the older generation who also may not know how to use the bus service properly, because they don't know where the timetables are. And I can see you're working really, really hard on that. And we just need to open it up to people. And I know that you lot are working really hard with that. So yeah, I mean, putting timetables, which hopefully we can get working for the bus stop itself, which I think is something that the London bus service do very, very well. So when you get to a bus stop, it will tell you what stop you're at, and from there forward and backwards where you're going and where the bus is going to go, and what time you're going to get where you're going to go, and what time you can get back to that bus stop. And that makes things a lot more confident for people using the bus service.
Yeah.
So yes, I'll have a chat. I will talk to my fellow councillors, and we'll get something done on this score.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
for your time.
Can I just say something? It might be worth. Have you got connections with like other? You mentioned Discovery and things like that. Is it worth rallying around all the disabled supported services and make a group kind of recommendation to the unitary?
It is something that I can do. I still have connections in Yeovil, in Street, in where are we? Taunton, in Wells.
Okay.
So there's lots of places, especially the 54 route.
Yeah.
But not at Wincanton, unfortunately. But yes, I still have those connections, and I probably can get some of the support workers to rally around a little bit and just put some information out there that this is something that we really would like to do, and get some names on some petitions.
Yeah, I think that would stand a lot. You'd have a lot stronger voice when you've got more people. That's what I when I first set up the Oval Bus Users, that was what people's voices were stronger together. And if you've got a stronger case, you've got a case. It's brilliant. But I think if you have more people shouting the same verse, you can make more of an impact. And I think that's what we really need. It's the same with all of this. The louder we can all work together and shout, we can get through.
Watch this space.
Okay, we will, Gary. Thank you very much. Rachel from Ilchester.
Hi. I had a question about the sort of if people are using the concessionary bus passes, whether that's be for the sort of, is it retirement bus pass or whatever that's called, does that count in the targets of 100 return journeys? Does that count as the same as a full ticket price?
Yes.
And is it the same for college students that have got like a student bus pass?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And
get them all on board.
Yeah. I know as well, I think I've seen it through the Facebook group, Linda, about the app that shows you when the buses are coming. I think that's probably a little bit difficult for people to use, especially if you're older, because you have to sort of go around the map and stuff. I was just wondering, I know someone mentioned in the chat about the text service that is, you text and it says what time the next bus will be at that stop. Is that sort of live information, or is that just this is the timetable, so the next one should be at that time?
I think it's always been a mixture when I've ever used it. Sometimes I just get the timetable of the next three. In some places I have seen how late they're running, or whether it's fed by the same logic that all the other online systems work. A lot of bus stops in Somerset still have the old plate. They haven't been updated. They haven't been repaired if they've got graffiti on them. If the bus stop's been replaced, they have not had a policy of redoing them. We had a discussion with Somerset this morning, as you've probably already realised. There's been a feeling that oh, they don't like to promote it because it costs 25p for the text. And, you know, it really is old technology, but it's technology that works. I don't know. I'd have to try it again at a few in Somerset to see some of these. Some of the bus stops have still got them. And I did raise this morning the new QR codes that are going up on bus stops. They could also carry the same information that that plate used to carry. This is the number of this bus stop, and this is how to text to get that information. The other advantage of doing that, if they ever get round to doing it, is that when you want to report a bus stop that has a problem, you will have immediate access to the code that's on the stop, so we can all identify it. I get fed up with the number of complaints I get about bus stops, and people say, oh, it's the one on the corner by the shop called, oh, I can't remember what it is, but it's somewhere near High Street, and it's ever so difficult to find. I have a database of all bus stops in Somerset, but it's, you know, they've all got a code on them.
Who is responsible for that tech service? Is it the bus companies themselves?
We had that question this morning and nobody knew the answer.
Yeah.
Somerset didn't seem to know anybody who knew the answer, so it's probably national. And then they did take up the idea of trying to get it changed from 25p a text to being free, because we have so many other free services.
I think if we could work out a way of getting some sort of like live updating system. I mean, even I don't like standing in the cold, but I imagine if you're, 70, 80, standing in the cold for 30 minutes waiting for a bus that's late, is a real turn off for using the bus. So
yeah.
If you could know, or it's going to be there in 5 minutes, so if I pop out now, I won't be in the cold for that long.
There are a number of systems that do that online. So if you've got a smartphone, that's fine. But I know an awful lot of people who've got a phone.
Don't have that.
They only use it to make phone calls. And they don't know how to access the internet from it, even if it could.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other points anybody would like to raise? Well, I'll hand over to Tony, who might like to just draw the meeting to a conclusion. He does it so much better than I do.
That's not true. But, I did jump in last night and just thanked everybody, those who are here and those who've been with us. This is a meeting about what you can do. We've had lots of meetings with the county telling us what they think they should do, with First Group who say they're going to support all this, but nothing seems to have happened since they made the announcements in July. It is difficult. We heard from First this morning, I'll let you know whether I believe them or not, about how their reliability is improving. They say if you haven't seen as many cancellations in the last 9 days as you did earlier, if they keep that up, they're getting a little closer to their targets. You will get people saying to you, how can I promote buses when the service doesn't go where I want, when I want it? How can I promote buses when they're unreliable? And the answer is to say, yes, we know that. We're working on it. We're working on a lot of things with a lot of people in the council and with First. But the message at the moment is these 4 routes are under threat. They will threaten members of your community who rely on them. And somehow you need to do something. Take a picture of yourself on a bus, get somebody else on a bus, come with them and promote the service in any way you can think of. We will try and help wherever we can. Any of the things that Peter suggested that you think, well, how could I do that? Come back and ask us, or better still, just get on and do it, as I know some of you already do. This is an important campaign. We have a few months to make a difference. The targets that Peter gave you are only that, they're targets. If we can show that we're working towards them, we shouted and screamed at First and said, we want some targets. I don't know how they calculate them. I don't know whether they assume the £2 fare will go on forever. I don't know whether they assume that they would have to pick up the £2 fare. I don't know how they calculate it, and I don't really care. We've got a number, we can monitor ourselves against it, and we can say we're working towards it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you again and good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, Josie.
Good night. Thank you.
It's a local holiday park.